In the beginning of Parshat Shemot, it says, "Vayakam melech hadash al Mitzrayim asher lo yadat Yosef." A new king arose who didn't know Yosef. Machlokas, whether he was really a new king or he just changed his mind about certain basic issues, but that's irrelevant for now. Vayomer elamo, and he told to his nation, "Hinei am bnei Yisrael rav atzum mimenu." They multiplied so much, and they're a large people. Hava netchachmalo. Pen yirbe vayakitren muchama. There might be, if in the occurrence of a war, v'nosaf hu osonenu, they'll join our enemies. V'nilcham banu, they'll wage war against us. Va'ala min haaretz, and they'll leave the land. So the simple reading of the parsha is that what Paro was afraid of is that the Israelis would leave the land, which is a little bit odd. The Medrash says that really the term, it should be understood as, and will be forced to leave the land. But the simple reading of the parsha is that what bothered him is that the Jewish nation will leave Eretz Mitzrayim. And in order to understand this, we'll have to go a little bit back into Bereishit to appreciate what happened. But I want to deal with another question, which it might be an illegitimate question, and that is, in the end of Parshas Vayigash, the Mitzrayim look at Yosef as a hero who saved them. Hechi Yisanu, you saved us. During the years of famine, it hadn't happened for Yosef, they would have suffered greatly. And he said that you basically were the one that saved us. And how was Paro able to turn the entire people against the Jews? So it's an illegitimate question, because is anti-Semitism rational? You have to figure out what the reason is. And also, clearly, this was part of the divine plan, and this is what, how destiny had to be. So the question might not be a legitimate question, but nonetheless, I think if we go back to Bereishit, the fact that the question is not legitimate doesn't mean that the answer is not good. And if we go back to Bereishit, I think we'll be able to trace certain events in order to understand how we got up to this point. And the first thing to notice is that the Egyptians despised the Ivrim. Whether this was racial or was something else, but the Egyptians despised the Ivrim. When Yosef comes and refuses the advances of Eshes Potiphar and runs away, so Eshes Potiphar is very, very angry and wants to turn the entire household against him, including Potiphar. And he says, Re'u hevi lanu ish ivri l'tzachek banu. The term ivri is used because she's trying to turn them against him. The same is true when the Sarah Mashkim comes and tells Paro about the person that was able to decipher the dreams. Of Shamitanu nar ivri eved l'sarat habachim. And he uses not only that he was a nar, he's a young child, he was but he's an eved, but also ivri. He talks about his where he comes from. He's an ivri. Ivri, they despise the ivrim. So when Paro decides, after Yosef deciphers the dreams, decides to have him rise to power and be the second in command, to be the Mishnah Lamelech, Vayom Paro Yosef Re'ei Natati Otcha Al Kol Eretz Mitzrayim, I'm putting you over all Egypt. Vayasa Paro Tobato, he gives him his ring. Vayitin Otal Yad Yosef, Vayibabesh Oto Bigdei Sheish, Vayasa Revid Zahav Al Tzavaro, Vayikwashem Yosef Tzofnar Paneach, Vayitin Lo Adosna Potifar. How does Paro do it? The answer is he changes him into Egyptian. He changes his name from Yosef to Tzofnas Paneach. He changes his dress. He has him marry the Egyptian royalty, the daughter of the Kohen of Egypt, and he's able to present him to the Egyptians not as a Nar Eved Ivri, but rather as an Egyptian. Now, this, now the question is, it all becomes much more complex when all of a sudden Yosef's brothers come, and eventually, after the entire story, Yosef invites his brothers and his father to come to Mitzrayim, And he says, Maru v'alu el aviv v'amatem elav kol mar bincha Yosef samani elokim la'adon l'chol Mitzrayim rida ilai al tamod v'yashavta be'eretz Goshen v'ayita karov ilai, and I will place you in Eretz Goshen. Okay, that's what Yosef says. I'll place you in Eretz Goshen. This is very, very significant. The next parasha, and he says, and you should come, bring everything, and I'll place you in Eretz Goshen, and I'll take care of you, and I'll support you. And then the pasuk says, V'akol nishma bei Paro l'mabal Yosef. All of a sudden, Paro hears about this. V'ayita b'nei Paro b'nei avodav. V'ayom Paro Yosef, emar lochecha zot asu. Come down. And he says, and don't worry about all your things. You don't have to bring anything. I'm going to take care of you. Come to me. He doesn't say go to Eretz Goshen. He says, come to me. Chot avichem uvo elai ve'en elechem et tuv Eretz Mitzrayim ve'enechem al tachos al klechem ki tuv Eretz Mitzrayim lachemu. Don't come with your flock. Don't come with your tzon. Leave everything there. Come to me, and I'll take care of you. Now Yosef says, "Come, and I'll place you in Eretz Goshen." But Paro says, "Come to me." Now this is going to be a problem, because if the Jewish people go to be in the capital city, in the Chatzer of Paro, there are one or two possibilities: either they'll assimilate, or they're going to embarrass him because they'll remain faithful to their, to their religion. They'll be faithful. They'll be Ivrim, and Ivrim are being despised. The dual game that Yosef was able to play, that on the one hand he was Yosef, but on the other hand publicly he was Tafnas Paneach. He was Delti Mishal Melech. How is that going to play out with the rest of them? And therefore, Yosef manipulates that they should be placed not in the capital city, not in the Chatzer of Paro, but that they should be placed in Eretz Goshen. Paro will call you, so tell them, we came with our flocks, and therefore, Paro will place you in Eretz Goshen. It was the original intention was not to be in Eretz Goshen, but Boelai. But since they came with their flocks, and Toevahu Mitzrayim Kol Ro'ei Etzon, they're not going to be able to, be able to raise their flocks in Mitzrayim, because Toevahu Mitzrayim Kol Ro'ei Etzon. So Paro says, Vayom Paro Yosef, Avicha vechacha ba'elecha. They didn't come to me; they came to you. Eretz Mitzrayim fanecha, place them in Eretz Goshen. So the manipulation of Yosef works, and it works for a certain time. And because of the distance, they're able to remain seen as the household of Yosef, who's the Mishnah Melech and Egyptian royalty, and benefit from being considered Egyptian royalty by being able to live separately in Eretz Goshen, far away from the lights. Now, this is critical. What happens at the end of Vayigash, when Yosef supports his family, lechem lefiataf, v'lechem im b'chol haaretz. The Egyptians have no bread, and therefore the Egyptians give Yosef all their money. The Egyptians sell, whatever herds they had. The Egyptians then sell their land and make themselves into feudal serfs, into feudal slaves. And Yosef says it's enough, 20% is enough, but he has them move from one place to another in order to indicate that the land no longer belongs to you. Who does the land still belong to? The royalty, the Kohanim. They don't have to sell their land. But all the other Egyptians have to sell the land and then move from one place to another place. And then the parasha ends, V'ta'ama evir le'arim, he had them move from one place to another. And then it says, Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim be'eretz Goshen, ve'yechazu bo ve'yifro ve'yir b'ma'od. Right? So the frame of this entire parasha is that Yosef gives the Jews lechem lefiataf, v'lechem ein b'chol haaretz. All the Egyptians lose their land, but as far as Yisrael is concerned, Vayeshev Yisrael be'eretz Mitzrayim be'eretz Goshen, ve'yechazu bo ve'yifro ve'yir b'ma'od. That's all fine, as long as we're talking about Egyptian royalty. When does it crack? It cracks when 17 years later, Yaakov is about to die. And Yaakov says, I want you to bury me in Eretz Canaan. When he says, I want to bury you in Eretz Canaan, that means that my identity is not Egyptian. I want to be buried in a different soil, in the soil of where my fathers were buried. Yaakov forces Yosef to take a shvuah. He's shavali, vayishavalo. Even after Yosef agrees, he says, take a shvuah. And after Yaakov dies, just to show how difficult it is, there were 70 days of national mourning when Yaakov died. And after the 70 days of national mourning, so Yosef has to bury Yaakov in Eretz Canaan. How is he going to do that? It says, Vayivku osam Mitzrayim shivim yom, vayavu yimei b'chiso, vayidaber Yosef el beit Paro lemor. Does Yosef go to Paro? No, he doesn't go to Paro. He talks to the household of Paro, and he says, Imnam matzatz yichem beinechem, dabruna be'eznei Paro lemor, avi yishpiani lemor. You tell. He can't tell Paro himself. He tells the household of Paro, oh, we heard that Yosef's father was mashpia him to be buried in Eretz Canaan. And then Paro tells Yosef, Al ikvar tavicha kasher hishpiecha. Rashi points out, had it not been for the shvuah, I wouldn't let it happen. Now, what happened over here is that all of a sudden, the mask, or this masquerade, was all of a sudden changed. They're Ivrim. They're Jews. They're different. They're despised. And they're not part of Egyptian royalty. The pasuk says, when they went up to the levaya of Yosef, Tek Mitzrayim, v'cho beis Yosef v'achiv ubeis aviv rak tapam v'sokam karam was Eretz Goshen. They left their flocks, they left their herds, they left their children. Who takes flocks and herds to a levaya? But what's beginning to happen is that all of a sudden, what Yosef did when he saved the people, but he gave preferential treatment to his family, that was all fine and accepted as long as they were Egyptian royalty. When all of a sudden it became clear that they're Ivrim, when it became clear that they're Jews, when it became clear that they milked the country and took advantage of the country. And because of that, the Egyptians were forced to sell their money, to sell their flock, to sell their fields. All of a sudden, there was no way that they were going to let the Jewish people leave Eretz Mitzrayim. The Egyptians were going to get back what Yosef took from them. And it's a process that begins. Yosef is not able to ask that he be buried in Eretz Canaan. Vayasam ba'arom b'Mitzrayim. They're not able to go up to the levaya with their flocks and with their children. They're stuck in Mitzrayim, and you hear the echoes of when Moshe comes and says, who's going to go with you? No, you don't have to take the children. The children were not allowed to leave because you are forced to come back. You don't have to take all your flocks. Not only we're going to take flocks, we'll take your flocks. The argument of whether they're going to come back or not come back. What eravon do they have that they're going to come back? You already hear it at the end of Bereishit. And now, if you take it the next step further, when Yosef and the entire generation goes, and all of a sudden there's a new king that comes on Mitzrayim, it's very, very easy for him to take Yosef, who saved Mitzrayim, and make him into enemy. He's different. He's not an Egyptian. He's not one of us. He did it for himself. He did it for his family. And we have to take back what he took from us. If there are a lot of them, if there's a war, they'll join the forces against us. We can't trust them anymore. They're aliens. They're Ivrim. They're despised. They'll join our enemies and they'll leave the land. We're not going to let them leave the land. We have to take back from them what they took from us. And they took Misim. They're forced to build and to work. And that's the beginning of Shibud Mitzrayim.